magazine for the urban music industry, but we're a national platform that provides real opportunities, real exposure, and real industry connection. Just log on to makingitmag.com. Sign up for your membership and start submitting music to get booked on major shows, magazine features, radio interviews, sponsorships, and more great opportunities. That's makingitmag.com. Doing dope stuff for dope artists. 10 years strong.
Hey, it's your man DJ Will Money. Catch my mix show Street Anthems live right here on K100 Radio each and every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern as I bring you the latest R&B and hip-hop music. Plus, check out my Indie Spotlight segment where I give indie artists a chance to shine. That's every Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern, Street Anthems live right here on K100 Radio.
It's going down.
Here's another exclusive interview on K100 Radio.
You are tuned to K100 Radio, hip hop and R&B.
K100, you bastard!
Oh yes, I told you guys, hold up a minute, just chill. I got you. All right, listen, this is the second half of our direct line interview for this particular hour and this particular day. Now we're gonna change gears a little bit. All right, we just talked to a musical guest, but we've got another kind of a guest on the line right now that we're going to have a completely different vibe and a completely different kind of style of conversation about. And I don't get a chance to talk to too many activists, so I'm really excited to have her over here on the show on K100 Radio. And I'd like to introduce Chenae Bullock. Am I saying your name right? That's right, Chenae? I want to make sure I got that correct.
Yeah, Chenae.
That's right, Chenae.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Chenae Bullock. She's on the line right now with K100 Radio, and we're getting ready to have a direct line interview. So what I like to do when I first bring my guests onto the air, especially when it's the first time they've ever been on the show, I like to go ahead and let you just kind of take the floor and kind of introduce yourself and tell everybody what you've got going on, what you're here to represent, and what you're here to talk about on K100 Radio. Ms. Bullock, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for having me. So, Nadasa Wisa Kampanayu Mission Netuyuskwa, Wachi Shinnecock, Wachi C1 Hockey. My given name is Eileen Canoe. I'm Butterfly Woman, and I come from the Shinnecock Indian Nation, which is in Southampton, Long Island, New York, New York.
All right.
I am an activist. You know, that term gets used quite a bit today, you know, but I'm an activist in terms of what people like to call me, but I'm just a traditional woman, and I'm just a woman that stands up for the rights of indigenous peoples all around the world. You know, so I'm super excited to be on the show to talk about a lot of the different events that has been occurring as far as, you know, different marches that have been happening. You know, we just had 2 Native women that have been put into Congress and elected into Congress and are already moving and shaking in the political arena, you know, and there's a lot of positive things that's happening in what we like to call Indian country. But out of these positive things, or what has kind of stirred these positive things, are a lot of the social and environmental injustices that's happening to our people and to our environment. And, you know, we're standing up and we're rising up to bring an end to those social injustices.
So I guess the first thing I have a question about is, you know, where do you start? Like, where is it that you actually start with the level of atrocity that's happened to the indigenous people of this country? You know,
mm-hmm.
It's for me, like there's a lot of similarities between what happened between African American, whatever you want to call slaves, black people, whatever term we coin it, and indigenous people, Native Americans, whatever you want to coin it. I don't know exactly which one is a politically correct term, but I just kind of use just plain speak when I do my show. There are so many similarities and so many differences. And even as a black person, I can't even wrap my brain to really begin and say, what's the issue that we tackle first? For you, for someone who represents indigenous people, and you say you've got all these different things going on and all of these issues that are happening in your community, that's been happening since basically you guys were looted, plundered, and pillaged like we were. What is it? What is the one?
Right.
What is the one that stands out the most that you feel like you need to grapple right now as a people? What do you think it is?
Oh man, that's a real tough question. You know, I think that it all starts with self. A lot of the, you know, when you kind of get into that self, we talk about historical trauma, and that historical trauma has been embedded in our genetic makeup, in our DNA. And a lot of times what's preventing us as indigenous people or as black people, or like you said, whatever political term people like to say, what's preventing us from moving forward is us, ourselves. You know, so you have all these different movements that's happening all around the country. And then when we try to unite sometimes, it's very difficult to move forward because this one's social injustice is greater than this one's social injustice. And that one's environmental injustice is greater than this environmental injustice. But at the end of the day, what's preventing us from really breaking down the borders between these social injustices is the historical trauma and the colonization that we have been put in, the mindset that we have. We have to unbreak these shackles on our own minds. And that starts with self, you know, self-identity, self-awareness. And, you know, they always say, you know, in order to know how to go forward, you have to know what happened in the past. And a lot of times we have an ideology that has been forced upon us through these institutions such as, you know, public schooling and even private schooling to say, okay, this is what the history of Native Americans is in a nutshell. And so everybody's now experts when they graduate high school on Native Americans. You know, I get it all the time. People say, oh, I know all about you. And I'm like, oh, you do. You know all about me. But they don't, you know, and it really starts with just self. That's kind of what I think the first thing is. And then once you do that, then you can kind of humble yourself to come together with other people that are either different from you or similar to you, and there's not a battle within that.
Right, exactly. Now, you yourself, you know, this particular interview came together really quick at the last minute. Shout out to the homegirl Sharp Bass for plugging us together and getting us over here, chopping it up.
Yeah.
But I looked into, you know, of course, when she hits me up, she's going to give me some background. And such a you know, really, really strong, educated woman. You know, you've got all these, you've got the degrees, you've got all the work, you've got everything done, so much experience. How do you take that and you say, okay, I've came out into this particular country, into this America, into this version of America, at least this version of America that we are currently in right now. I've went to these schools, I went and learned and experienced these things. Now I got to take it back to my people, my indigenous people, and convince these people that have, rightfully so, many issues with this current version of America, that the path that you took is the right one. The education, learning, going to colleges, doing all of these things, and kind of not abandon the old ways. But I feel like indigenous people were so much more in tune with the planet, that we live on, that we're currently killing in a thousand different ways to kill this planet. A million different ways that we're killing the planet. Like we got somewhere else to go. Like we can just hop on a bus and go to another planet. We act like we got another one that we can just hop over to, and we don't. And I felt like the indigenous people a part of. I don't know everything about it. I know I haven't really. I'm not a scholar in it. I know a little bit more than what the average person may know because I do my own research. But it just seems like they were so spiritually in tune with the earth. How do you take your education and take it back and then shape it to fit the soul and what it really means to be Native American or indigenous, you know, where it's more spiritual. It's not necessarily about books and everything. It's just about you being one with yourself and the spirit world. How do you combine that and make it all work and then chart your own path as Chenae Bullock and say, listen, I can do all of that and I can represent my culture at the same time?
Well, I actually did it reverse because I was born into my culture, right? So I didn't get my education and go to my culture. I had my culture. I had my foundation. I have my my roots and my understanding and self-identity and awareness and balance in all of the medicine areas, you know, be it physical, spiritual, mental, emotional. You know, I had that balance already. Not completely, because, you know, I was still growing into a woman. And then went into public schooling and went into, college, but always having that foundation. So if school didn't fit into my life ways, then school wasn't for me. And I in our indigenous communities, you know, everybody the way we look at things in a circular way. Our homes were never squared. They were always round. The circles that we sit in are not boxes. We don't really have structure of Robert's rules of order. You know, when you're talking about being governed underneath natural law.
Right.
The institutions actually contradict our way of thinking because it's a colonized institution.
Right.
So I can't take my community and force them to be something that they're never meant to be. However, I could fit into these institutions and see it with an indigenous lens and take from my, with using my indigenous perspective to see what of these studies are going to help. I may not be able to take everything. I may not be able to retain everything. My mind and my body and my spirit might reject a lot of things from in these institutions, but I just look at it as just learning how to create a balance. And that day by day is the most difficult thing for me to do. Every day I wake up is a struggle, every single day, because the world that we live in, society that we live in, systematically oppresses anyone that is in the natural, that tries to govern themselves underneath natural law and the spiritual law. And it's very hard every single day. But understanding how that system works is really to teach yourself how to navigate through it, not how to take that system and recreate that system inside of your traditional communities, but it's really to how to be traditional and to navigate through the system to bring your people through. That's how I look at the education system.
All right. Well, listen, this is K100 Radio. I'm your host, Blizzum. Thanks, everybody, for tuning into the show. We're chopping up right now with Chenae Bullock. She's an activist. She's an indigenous people community member. And I guess, you know, you went back and you nailed the question that I was asking you, because when you talked about it being a struggle, and that's kind of what I was trying to get at and trying to assert to, like, how is it that you function in this particular society when you know the history, when you know everything that's going on, and you know how hard it is. And you guys, I think the major difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the major things that can separate the genocide that happened to indigenous people and slavery that happened to African Americans is, at some point, some kind of way, which is right, which makes sense, and which is a little bit right, and in a hell of a lot of ways wrong, essentially. But you guys were able to carve out sections of this country to where you made sovereign. You were able to, at least some way.
Well, actually, that really wasn't our choice.
Well, I know
that
it wasn't your
ours.
choice. No, I know, but it wasn't your choice. It wasn't black people's choice to be brung over here either, for the most part. But at least, like in 2019, there's literally a community where you can go, where there is laws that and land that is owned and governed by indigenous people. And I mean, I know you were not handed it the way you wanted it to be handed, and a lot of you had to go and fight for and get, but you have that, and African Americans don't. So, and it's not, I'm not saying it like it's a good thing.
Well, you also have to look at it this.
Yeah.
But you also have to understand, you use the word laws, and laws, the word law basically is what differentiates indigenous communities, because you have several different terms. You have indigenous, aboriginal, Native American, American Indian, and Indian. Those legally have different terms. Mm-hmm. When you're talking about a tribe that is federally recognized by the federal government,
right,
that tribe supersedes the state government,
right,
and its decisions and
right,
its laws. And
right,
underneath the U.S. Code, Title 25, when you're dealing with Indians, the protection of Indians, and a couple of those different sections of that Title 25 in the U.S. Code of Law makes the state have to protect that particular tribe, which is federally recognized. So, but mind you, when I say that I'm Shinnecock, I am of one of the colonial tribes. I am of one of the tribes that first greeted Henry Hudson as he sailed past the Long Island Sound and up the Hudson River in the 1500s, in Amerigo Vespucci, you know, and all of these different map makers, if you will. It was the Shinnecock and the Montauk and the Wampanoag and the Narragansett, our tribes in the Northeast. We were greeted first. Before there were 13 colonies, there were 4 united colonies, and before there were 4 united colonies, They were just small settlements. And those settlements dealt directly with our tribes. So our tribes in the Northeast have an official, legalized, legal binding agreement, not with the federal government and not with the state government, but directly with Europe. Mm-hmm. And those agreements have whether they have been broken or not, they still hold a lot of legal weight today. And so you can't strip a tribe of its sovereignty if the tribe was sovereign before you got here. Exactly. You might be able to genocide and misplace and move around laws and create, again, this system that is very hard for us to function through. And that's the big difference. These reservations didn't come into place until the Indian Removal Act in the 1800s, the later 1800s, directly after slavery was abolished. But you have tribes in the Northeast that have a very different history, as we just lived there and settlement happened around us. And then it wasn't until the Indian Removal Act that they said, oh, well, these are still people in the Northeast. What are we going to do with the people that live in this neighborhood? Well, we're going to call it a reservation because that was something to call it. Now, are those laws upheld today? No. Almost every single title in dealing with pertaining to Native Americans in the U.S. Code of Law is broken, regardless if we're governments or we're not. So, you know, it's completely broken, and that's what we're still fighting for.
Right. So is that? I'm trying to dive directly into the main fight that you guys have. Like, is that the biggest core part of your legal and fight? But besides the fact that you guys they committed genocide and basically wiped most of you out. Is that the legal precedent? Is that the fight that you guys are still fighting right now to make those actual titles and laws that are actually written in history books and are actually on the books right now to make them be effective and make this country recognize them? Is that a big part of the fight that you guys have going on? Because as black people, we don't have that. We don't have reparations. We don't have. We don't even know if it depends on who you asking. The way the Constitution reads, are we technically really free? I mean, we are, but then they made us a human. Right. So it's like they got all these other little slick parts of the Constitution and all these other amendments that kind of sort of say we're free technically, yeah. But so is that a part of your journey? Is that a part of the fight of your people? Or what is the core thing that you guys just hold up and say, listen, besides above anything else, this shit right here needs to be addressed? And is it that which gives you the right to have everything? Well,
yeah, else? I mean, it really has a lot to do with, again, you have federally recognized, state recognized, historically recognized, or underrepresented. And these are all terms for how tribes are classified or how they're looked at by the government, whether it's state, local, whatever. So self-determination is a big topic in what we call Indian country. And I'm not talking about indigenous people globally right now, because what's going on in Australia with indigenous people is the same thing that's going here, but their fight is going to be a little difficult to maneuver through because of how the countries are set up, you know, and how they deal with the original people of those lands. So here in North America, if you will, and the same kind of thing in Canada, because we never put borders between these communities, we are still fighting for what we call, quote unquote, trust responsibility. I mean, if you look at every single pretty much agency, every single law, everything that has to do with energy, Department of Commerce, natural resources, environmental protection, National Park Services, all these different governmental agencies, if you really look through them, you're always going to see tribal, native, indigenous people. We are written in almost every single law in this country. And if you really read the fine print. So there's never a way for the government to get around it, but they are. And it has to do with us not being really educated and how that is. So it's almost like a roadblock. We need to become educated to see, okay, well, they're trying to go down this road, but we got to block them. And then we have to hold them accountable. You have to hold them accountable for it. But the hard part is, I mean, we're functioning right now as American citizens, quote unquote, a lot of us don't like to say we are, but we are, right? We have Social Security cards, and a lot of that kind of stuff is changing.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
we're trying to function in a government that's not even functioning. So let alone us Native people screaming trust responsibility.
Right.
I mean, yesterday was the State of Indian Nations. Every year, like almost a week after the State of the Union address, NCNAI, which is the National Congress of American Indians, they hold a State of Indian Nations address, and it happens right in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an organization that has all of the tribal leaders in the Indian country of federally recognized tribes come together. All of the tribal leaders, all of the tribal presidents, they all come together and they have an address, and they give this address to the Trump administration. And again, just the same thing that you and I are discussing is what they're discussing to the government administration, to say, look, you guys have a responsibility to us as indigenous people. You're not upholding it. But the hard part is we do not have the military. We do not have the institutions and everything else that the government has. So we're a little weak in that area.
That's pretty
and
much.
And economical power, too.
Well, now here's where it starts to blend in with us. You know what I'm saying? With black folks, what you want to call us.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you. I got a quick question before I say what I got to say, because I don't want to lose this point. What is the term that you refer to black people? What's the term that you refer to us as? Black people? What do you call us?
I mean, I go back and forth between black and African American.
Okay.
And I only do that because I don't want to offend anybody. I mean, I consider myself black and Native American. But, I only really do it because I know who I am, and I just don't want to offend anybody.
Right.
Some people take it real personal.
Yeah. This is not the show for that, by the way, Chenae. This is K100 Radio. Listen.
Okay.
All bets are off. But listen, though. So what I'm saying is, and brings me back to my point, the similarity of what you're saying, the teeth that you have to have as a people, the muscle that you have to have as a people. See, here's where we start to find some similarities in between those that were genocide that were committed, that genocide was committed against, and those that were enslaved. You feel me? And also genocide at the same time on the back end. Also, the similarities are this: the fight that we have is kind of sort of with the same entity, which is the U.S. government, which is essentially, even if it's not Trump himself or his daddy, whoever, for everybody listening to the show, all right, their ancestors, white folks, Caucasians, whatever you want to call them. We don't got time for the political correctness right now, but this country, the colonizers, whatever the hell you want to call these people, are a common enemy. Why? It seems to me that if any two ethnic communities in this country should be joined at the hip every time it's time to make a move, it's us. It's indigenous, Native, African, black, whatever the hell you want to call it, folks. And I don't understand why that isn't. I know you guys have your own culture, and we've developed our own culture within this culture that we've had to make, because we're not even a lot of us call ourselves African Americans, but then again you meet Africans who don't necessarily consider us Africans because we're so different in many lights, in many ways. So I've never understood why we're not joined at the hip in all our causes, because of our common history and enemy, and B, because at the same time there's a lot of similarities in between what we actually need to happen. Let me ask you this. So I go all around to say this. How do you think that something can happen on our end, your end? How do you think the relationship between the indigenous and the enslaved can be broadened, can be stronger, can be built, can come together? Because I mean, give me an idea. I don't know, but I just feel like why not? And it doesn't
I think
make any
it has
sense.
to do. I think it has to do exactly what the first question that you asked, and my answer was historical trauma. Decolonizing yourself as a person and then your home as a whole, because the histories are very broad, right? When you hear the term African American, you think of slavery in this country, and then you think of Native American, and then you think of, well, Native Americans feel this way about us. But then that's a very broad, generic, cliche thought, because the Shinnecock tribe versus the Pindar Lee tribe in Montana has very different histories with black people.
Right.
So if you kind of balloon that and you make it like the Shinnecock people are different or they're the same as the Pindar Lee, you know, there's going to be kind of a battle. But then again, you know, the common denominator here is the divide from the federal government.
Right.
Whereas they're the ones that have fed us this history. It is time for us as individuals to research our own history for our health and healing first. And then humble yourself to learn about somebody else's history from somebody else.
Right.
From that particular person. It's one thing to figure, like, you know, do your own research on somebody else's history, but you're still kind of not learning about that person. You're hearing about that person. In order to learn about somebody. And then once you kind of get that kind of out the way, there's a respect that comes. It's like, wow, I did not know that the Muskogee songs were very similar to the slave songs because some of the slaves hid in the swamps with the Muskogees during, you know, the Underground Railroad.
Right.
You know, so but that's the Creek and Muskogee people. That's not necessarily any other tribe.
Right, exactly.
But if you didn't understand that particular history, then you wouldn't know that. And I think that that's really what it comes, because people that, when you have that historical trauma, naturally you're going to be defensive. Naturally, you're going to shut down certain areas of your brain from receiving any kind of knowledge because you're defending yourself. And I hear that so much about, you know, a lot of black people that I meet that like, well, my great-great-great-grandmother, you know, is Cherokee. And then I hear and I see the natives like, well, you know, everybody's Princess Cherokee's granddaughter and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And it's like, but wait a minute now. Cherokee was a big nation. There's a lot of history with Cherokee and African-American people.
Right.
And this person's family originates from Tennessee or actually Oklahoma or North Carolina or South Carolina. How do you know that this person is not lying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And those are things that we've got to humble ourselves to put those barriers down and just kind of sit down and have like a bonfire moment. Yeah. You know what I mean? And just really learn about that. And it takes research. But, you know, I think that that's what it's really, really going to take. I mean, but it also takes somebody getting shot and raped and killed today in today's society in 2019, both black and native on both sides. I think that the mothers who are native and the mothers that are black can come together and put those differences aside. Yeah. Because they live in the same zip code. They live in the same apartment complex. These are things that are happening to their children that went to the same school together. Regardless if they were native, black, or Chinese, or Latino, whatever you want to call it, these injustices are still happening to our people.
And I guess
but the black people have, like, there is a lot of economical wealth that's happening in black communities that's kind of lacking in indigenous communities. That's something that native people can learn from, you know, I think. Yeah. And then our governmental structure is something that could be advocated for with black people.
Exactly.
Because we can actually protect and fight on a government-to-government level.
Right.
That black people cannot on that level unless they're in official positions.
Exactly.
And inside the U.S. government.
That's the whole point. It's so much to digest, so much to dissect. You know, and 30 minutes is definitely not enough for this conversation because I had like 8 questions and I didn't get to any of them.
Well, I hope you have me back.
So listen though, no, but everything you're saying is so true and there's so much to digest. Especially just real brief. One thing that you said when you pointed out the difference between the two tribes, people have to understand that within indigenous people, before white people took it over, there were warring tribes and different philosophies of people that actually inhabited this continent who already went to war over several other different things that they didn't like about each other. And so, of course, that would carry on down the line. You feel what I'm saying? Even after all the atrocities that happened, which, of course, would affect the relationship between the way one indigenous person looks at black people and another. also, like you said, the bonfire moment has to happen. And also, sadly, I agree with the fact that there's going to have to be some kind of damn tragedy that affects us both because how do indigenous people feel when they see Mike Brown, when they see, you know what I'm saying, when they see Eric Garner, you know what I'm saying, when they see Trayvon Martin, are they feeling the same way? Are they feeling as tight as black people? I don't know. They should or shouldn't they? But how do we feel about different issues that affect you guys?
The big problem is social media divides who your demographic is. You know, a lot of people in the indigenous community didn't even know some like these big things. And a lot of the native people that are dying, the black people didn't know, oh, I didn't know who so-and-so was. I didn't know that happened in Seattle.
Right.
Because we haven't broken that little entrance to our networks. And it takes your radio show. It takes people like you inviting people like me on to reach a demographic and talking about things that they didn't know about.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
And now it's like, we're beginning to break the cycle or the circle, like those gates to our networks, and start open those gates up and start crossing in between those networks. I think that's what it's really going to take. Conversation first.
Absolutely.
You can't play in a war unless you had a conversation about it.
Absolutely. You can't
or how to
definitely
fight
can't
a
fight
war.
together. Yeah, you can't.
Unless
You
you don't
definitely can't.
strategize.
Yeah, you can't fight together at all without talking about our strategy at first. You know what I'm saying? Are we even? Are we on the same team? Are we on the same side? You know what I'm saying? Listen, great conversation. Hold on. I think I have a person that may want to talk, and I always want to try to get a caller on if they do call in. Let me check my line real quick and check this 937 number. Area code 937-349. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. Who is this?
Hi. This is Shamika, and I wanted to give input on the topic tonight.
Go ahead. By all means, go ahead. We got time. Go ahead.
And I'm speaking as a minority. I am African American and Hispanic. So I say this from my own experience. I think it's important, of course, to know your history and all of those things. I was raised here in America, of course, in upstate New York. So I know what it is to have pride in who you are and, you know, represent your community. But I think there comes a point in time in which you have to move past it. Like, you have to move past all of the tragedies of your ancestors. You know what I mean? There's simply no time to dwell on slavery or what the white man took from your ancestors and how they took your land. You know, like I said, I am half black and half Hispanic, so I get the whole racism thing, the whole prejudice thing, you know, the whole, you know, history of America and how they did us. But I just think if you want to be successful in this country or in any aspect of your life, if you focus on adversity and make that such an icon, it just hinders you, you know. So just, I don't know. So what I would say to your guests is, yes, you know, things have happened in your community, to your people, but come on.
What about
there comes a point in time where you have to move on.
When it's still happening? But what about when it's still happening?
Yeah, what about when it's still happening?
Yeah, but you know what? Adversity is always going to happen. Like, there will never be peace on earth. That's just part of the human experience. You understand what I mean? And I'm just as hurt when I see
things.
Yeah,
I'm just trying
to follow it.
Yeah, no, help. Let me moderate. Let me ask you this question, because I mean, of course, you can't listen. I'm a firm believer of your past does not dictate your future. I live by that mantra. If where I came from dictated anything, I wouldn't have this broadcast. I wouldn't be doing this right now if that was the case. So so I understand that aspect of what you're saying. But what I think me and my guest, and I think I'm going to be me and my guest is definitely going to be on agreement with this, is it's okay to let it go when it's dead and gone, when it's done. I don't necessarily always talk about slavery and put it up to a point where we champion it to that point. But what I will not let slide, and what I will not act like doesn't happen, is when a guy gets choked out by the police over a pack of cigarettes and nothing happens. And all of that stuff is coming down the pipe. Is coming down the pipeline because of a history of feelings that this person of this color and this creed, life doesn't matter as much. Because if that was a white man that was choked out like that, it would be a totally different scenario. You agree, right? Can you agree on that part? Like,
I totally understand.
Or when land is still being taken away. Like,
but you know what?
our sister tribe, is like in the process of getting their whole land stripped from them, and they were the first to be greeted. And we were just celebrating how far that they've come and being able to get more land. And just in December of 2018, a notion has been made for that land to be taken from them, as it happened in 1627. So I understand what you're saying. It's not like we're reflecting on our ancestors, but one thing in our culture is that we always honor and acknowledge our ancestors because they're among us. That's the belief that we have. Not that we're walking around sad and those type of things, but we are very resilient in our efforts. But if these things are still happening, we cannot continuously just move aside and let this stuff still happen because it's wrong.
No, definitely.
And where we're at now is being able to move globally.
I definitely agree with that. But I just think that when you are in America, you have to understand that, it will never be, I'm not saying be subservient and bow down. What I'm saying is, of course, if there's injustice, stand up, march, fight for the people who have no voice. But to dwell on it and to surround your entire life around it so much to where, people of other ethnicities and other races, speaking of white individuals, don't want to, have dealings with you because you're so far into your culture, that's a turnoff. In order to be successful in this country and to move successfully, you kind of have to not make that like your main goal.
You're right.
You know what I mean?
You're exactly
it's just
right.
a turn off.
You're right. Andrew Jackson said it best. He said it best. Kill the Indian and save the man. And that is an actual. There are great examples of exactly what you're talking about right now. To the point that people can come back to their communities.
That was something that was so far long ago.
Right. Okay, I gotta.
Yeah, but it's still being implemented today.
Right. I gotta. I don't mean to cut you off, Carla. I really appreciate your input. Nice perspective.
No,
nice.
You are cutting me off because
I gotta cut you off.
She sat on this phone for 30 minutes.
Yeah, because she's the guest and you're not. All right. Anyway, K100 Radio. It's a good thing I'm the boss over here, and it's a good thing I'm the moderator. I have to cut things off, and you have to do that. All right. So I understand.
Okay.
I let her go on because I love to have that back and forth, and I love to hear someone who would like to attempt to take over my show, which is not going to ever fucking happen. It's not going to happen. It's my show. All right.
It's cool. I've worked in museum fields for a long time, and I've dealt with questions like that, and I appreciate them because it needs to be had, and it needs to be had publicly.
Listen,
because it's a real debate. It's a real difference.
I agree with. I told her I'm all for not trying to sit here and play the quote unquote race card when it's convenient type shit. Like, you know what I'm saying? Nah, fam. We're not gonna do that. You know what I'm saying? You got to be a man and take care of your kids. You got to be a man, go out here and work and get on your grind. You feel me? You're gonna respect these women. You know what I mean? We're gonna do all that. But at the end of the day, we ain't finna act like we ain't finna pour sugar on shit. You know what I'm saying? And call it a Snicker bar. We're not doing that over here.
Right.
You feel what I'm saying? Like, facts. We're not doing it, fam.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So listen.
Not with us being on front lines.
Right. Yeah, it's not gonna happen. But I let her ride out a little bit because I already knew that she was gonna. When she started talking, I was like, "Hey, I loved it. This is great. This is what we need. That fodder." Because there's a couple million people who feel exactly like that person does. And what do you say to them? You say the same thing.
Yep.
What are you gonna say to them? Some of them, no matter what we say, they're gonna always feel like, "No, listen to my point." And I'm like, "Listen to our point." And we're never gonna go there. We're never gonna agree. You feel what I'm saying? But
yeah, yes,
agree. We're not gonna agree. Listen, it was great. We got to continue this conversation. I done went all the way past the cutoff time. My apologies to everybody that's still over here. My Instagram live actually shut off because I was going too long. So I apologize to everybody who may have been,
That's okay.
waiting to get back to the music. But this was a great conversation with Chenae Bullock. Before we go, I need for you to drop any information, anything that you feel like the people need to hear from you that we didn't get a chance to cover right here on this segment. Your social media, where they can contact you,
Yes.
anything that you got coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah, the best thing to do is just follow me on Instagram, Twitter. It's at APONIWIND, at APONIWIND. I do a whole lot of different things. I could just go down the list, but I'm just really grateful to be on this show, and I hope to be able to do more interviews like this on, more of a demographic outside of Indigenous Network, to hopefully enlighten people and just make good connections all around and help to heal the world. So.
Well, we're glad to have you on, and next time we'll open up the phone lines a little bit earlier, but I'm already 15 minutes over the cutoff time. My apologies, everybody. I'm sorry, but that was a good conversation, and I wanted to take that one call, and we got to wrap it up. We're supposed to be done at 8. I appreciate it. Listen, make sure you go and check her out on social media. Rock with her. Again, we'll have this conversation sidebar, and we'll continue the conversation, and we'll have you back again, all right?
All right. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
You are tuned to K100 Radio.
All right, that's that.
R&B.
Yeah.
K100, you bastards.
I really appreciate you guys for hanging around for that particular segment. Like I said, of course, we mostly talk to music artists, and this is mostly a music-based broadcast. But again, at the end of the day, when it comes down to the core mission of K100 Radio, of course, we have a lot to do with, social awareness, and we slick be on some political stuff sometime. We talk about a lot of different topics, especially the whole broadcast was actually founded on the talk segment side of what it is that ended up becoming the broadcast that you see as K100 Radio. And we definitely want to get back into that. I really miss the debates. I miss the calls. I miss the going back and forth with the callers, and sometimes having to occasionally hang up on the motherfucker. I understand, but sometimes we let them ride out as much as we possibly can, because we love the devil's advocate. We love the jab. We love the back and forth. And this is a politically incorrect show. You know what I'm saying? So, again, I hope you guys are tuning in for another one of our talk segments. If you're on our YouTube page right now, please, 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 please hit that subscribe button. If you listen to our podcast, make sure you follow the podcast. Follow us on SoundCloud if you listen to this after the fact. We really appreciate everybody who's rocking with us. K100radio.com, at K100_radio. Thank you guys for rocking with us. All right.